Shalom and welcome, Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. Today, the 24th day of the month of Tammuz, 5774, it's July 22nd, 2014. It is the 15th day of Operation Tzok Eitan, Protective Edge, here in Israel. And we are reading the Torah portion of Masei. It is the final, the ultimate Torah portion of the book of Numbers. It's also Shabbat Mevarchim, the Sabbath of blessing, the new moon of the month of Av, which falls out this coming Sunday night and Monday, July 28th. Every year, we've been teaching about the frailty and the inherent built-in mechanism of self-defeat and danger in the month of Tammuz, because the month of Tammuz is the time of the sin of the spies taking place, as it were, in the continuum of time. It's the time of where it's so necessary to rally for the land of Israel and to let the good of the land of Israel shine forth. These are the days that are fraught with the tension of the destruction of the Holy Temple. We have begun the period known as between the Straits, Bein HaMitzarim, between the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, the fast of Tammuz, which was exactly a week ago, and in another 2 weeks from today, the 9th of Av, which of course is the day of the destruction of both holy temples. And this is a period that requires tremendous rectification, and boy, are we feeling it now. So what's going on here in the land of Israel, which I reiterate is absolutely the safest, most wonderful, heavenly place in the whole world. More and more, as we see what's going on in the world, I know Yitzchak and I want to talk about this, I don't see going anywhere else but the land of Israel. And that might sound very strange to you, very ironic, knowing that there are 5 million of us now here in Israel that are within striking range of rockets, and that rockets indeed are falling in every major metropolitan area and every other area here in the land of Israel. But you know what? There's really no place else to go. And that is exactly what this Torah portion is all about. This Torah portion has a number of very, very distinct, singular messages that we try to give over in our weekly video lesson of parashat Masei this week. The idea of everything else that goes on outside the land of Israel in the howling wilderness that is the desert, of the 42 journeys of life that takes place in the life of the individual and the life of the nation before we come into the land of Israel. That's all just preparation, but it doesn't count. There's only one place to be, and that is here. So, Yitzchak, you were just telling me before we began about how this war is in some ways different than every other. There's a number of fronts, that's for sure. One of the fronts is the media, and in that way, I think everyone all over the world is a very, very active participant, whether they're for us or against us. But look, the basics of what's going on is very simply, just like we made a mistake, if I may be so bold as to say, just like we made a mistake so long ago in the month of Tammuz, when the spies were walking around seeing the negative things in the land of Israel, and they came back on the 9th of Av and gave their negative report and doomed Israel with that cycle of self-defeat for so many years. So too, we made a terrible mistake in the disengagement, in breaking away from Gush Katif,
which I believe took place on the 9th and 10th of
the month of Av, and we exiled
Jews.
all those righteous Jews, and that was like a Gan Eden. It was like a paradise on earth. That area called Gush Katif, where innovative, bold, bright Israeli technology invented basically for the whole world new types of hydroponics, the most incredible vegetables that were grown there, this beautiful community, many of them by the sea itself, these communities, over 21 communities there in Gush Katif. And it was given to Palestinian Authority back then, Arafat. That quickly turned into Hamas. And now there's only one thing I have to say. Okay, this operation, this defensive operation now that's taking place called Protective Edge. It's basically to try and, I mean, Netanyahu says it's not about retaking Gaza, although I'm happy to hear that he and other ministers are saying that every option is on the table and that if we have to retake all or part of Gaza, then we will. But he says that what it's about the tunnels. It's about isolating and destroying the tunnels and restoring the calm and quiet for Israel. You have to understand something now. In many communities in Israel, in the south, in Sderot, in Ashkelon, and in Ashdod, I mean, people, families, children are sleeping in the safe rooms, in air raid shelters every night. They are getting up 4, 5, 6 times a night to sirens. And every one of these rockets that's being launched at Israel, and by the way, since, I mean, the year 2000, they've actually been launching rockets at us, so maybe you're just hearing about it now. But the fact is, this is just all day long, rockets are falling. In Israel, imagine wherever you live, whether it's Miami Beach or, I don't know, wherever you live, imagine hearing a siren and knowing that you have 15 to 90 seconds to find shelter because these rockets are falling. To say nothing of the squads that are emerging out of these tunnels to murder us. But here's the thing. I can only recall one thing. When we were growing up, I don't know, I'm a little out of touch. I don't know if these things are still popular. But there was something like a science project that kids would have called an ant farm. You have this ant farm, right? It's like a cross section. It's like in a narrow kind of square thing, and you see how ants make these very elaborate professional tunnels, and it's crisscross network of vast system of tunnels, right? I want to tell you something. These animals, these barbarians, these I don't want to call them Palestinians, right? They took this beautiful area that, by the way, we promised them, I didn't, believe me, but Israel promised them an agreement of technology and know-how. We were going to give over to them all these factories, and they were going to use it, and they were going to keep up that industry of exporting vegetables and fruit to the whole, flowers to the whole world. And instead, they did what they do best. They destroyed it, and they made it into nothing, into ashes.
Into death.
And they made it into death, right? And so now they're firing at all of Israel from that area where you used to have these beautiful Jews living. But let me tell you something. Picture that ant farm, this network of these elaborate crisscross tunnels, okay? Do you understand what they did here? And yet Kerry, may his name be obliterated, and Obama and all these characters, they're talking about a ceasefire, they're talking about peace, they're talking about the 2012 peace accord terms, they're talking still about 2 states, they're talking about cooperation, they're talking about living
rebuilding
in peace.
Gaza. Kerry already pledged $50 million to rebuild, $47 million
right,
to rebuild Gaza.
And they're talking as if that things could get normal. But what I want to say is this one sentence. What do these animals do? During all of these years, since we gave them Gaza, instead of developing anything, schools, hospitals,
bomb shelters
for their citizens, instead of developing anything, they invested millions of dollars that Europe and America and Qatar and you, gentle listener, through your taxes, you paid for. They took all that money, and of course the leaders of Hamas are there's pictures all over the internet of them having 14-course breakfasts in Qatar and on their private planes and everything else. It's like the Carly Simon song, you know, I heard you flew your jet to Nova Scotia. And there they are, they're having a great time. And what did they do during the years that they had Gaza? They created an infrastructure of death and terror and destruction. You're hearing about these tunnels, people? These tunnels in Gaza that the IDF is going after?
Kilometers long.
These don't look like tunnels in an ant farm. These tunnels are reinforced concrete and steel with running water, sewage, electricity, food. You can stay down there for months, and there are so many of them today. Just today, there's an intelligence report in the Jerusalem Post that American intelligence is telling Israel, guess what? According to our satellites, there are more tunnels than you even realize. This is what they've done with their time and with your money.
And all the concrete and supplies that the world was so angry that Israel wouldn't let in because we have to allow them to build up their houses and their industry, and every grain of cement and every grain of sand and every piece of metal that they were able to bring in went toward building these tunnels and building missiles.
So it's like the 9 circles of Dante's Inferno underground. It's 9, isn't it?
I always thought it was 7, but
I think it's 9. I'm pretty sure it's 9 circles. And there they are, and this is what they spent their money and their time on, because their whole goal is only to destroy Israel. Do you understand how many years it took to develop this system? It's incredible. This is a country. This is the country that they want. This is all it is. It's just about a place from which to launch attacks against Israel. Small wonder the charter of Hamas is to murder every Jew, not only the ones in Israel.
And the entire Hamas army, and certainly their leaders, are all underground in these protected tunnels, while the quote-unquote innocent population above is left on their own to deal with Israel's reprisals. And then Hamas cries out to the world, "Oh, look what Israel's doing. Look how cruel they are. They're killing innocent people."
And as Yitzchak said, one of the big news items has been about Israel's blockade of Gaza, that we don't even allow building materials. And this is what they have done with all of these building materials. They weren't interested in building houses or schools or hospitals, because they're still using the UN schools and the UN hospitals. And by the way, speaking of the UN, UNRWA, schools and hospitals, because of course they need to keep up this image that they're refugees. Big news item, if you chose to hear about it, was that the United Nations Relief Worker Association, UNRWA, was caught red-handed that in one of their school buildings there were 20 Hamas rockets. And by the way, again, very well publicized on Arutz Sheva and other news sites the past week, the IDF conclusive evidence, photos, videos showing how Hamas is firing rockets from a hospital, from a mosque, how a tunnel entrance is in a mosque.
Cemeteries,
schools. So the United Nations Relief Workers, whatever it is called, school is found to have 20 rockets in it. And guess what? They returned them to Hamas. The United Nations returned these rockets to Hamas. And yet, Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, made a big headline a couple days ago saying, this is the word that he chose to use describing Israel's actions in Gaza. He said it was atrocious. So we have the proof, and it's all over the internet, that Hamas uses its citizens as human shields. Look on the internet and look at the language of the leaflets that the IDF poured all over Gaza, begging the people to leave, begging the people to evacuate. And yes, tens of thousands have heeded the call, and hundreds of thousands of SMSs and phone calls to the residents of Gaza telling them that we have no choice, we have to go in to route this out, please leave. But the Hamas comes and says, no, don't leave, stay on the rooftops and deter the Israeli action. So as someone put it very beautifully, one of the pundits, I don't remember who it was, I heard this yesterday, said the expression that Israel has a system to defend its citizens from missiles, but Hamas uses its citizens to defend its missiles. So these tunnels, first of all, are unreal. It's a world. It's not just a city. It's a world of evil. It's like looking at the face of evil, because it was created just to kill. And one of the things that happened a couple days ago is that the IDF took out a group of terrorists that they caught emerging from these tunnels. And these tunnels, you should understand, these tunnels, they emerge inside
of Israel, right.
Inside kibbutzim,
inside towns. People have discovered that there are even tunnels right under their houses.
Yes, and the entrances of these tunnels, like you said, they're in hospitals, they're in schools, on the Gaza side, in mosques and private houses. But there was one tunnel where the entrances came out in the land of kibbutz Sufa. And these terrorists were armed to the teeth with enough armament to start a small world war. RPGs and incredible explosives and submachine guns. And there would have been, as President Perez said, the IDF prevented a wholesale massacre of this kibbutz. Or were they going to hijack and kidnap a bus full of children? Who knows? And every day they're using these tunnels also to hide rocket launchers and to engage in clandestine attacks against every citizen of Israel. So we've got this code red going off. And by the way, now there's a site that you can look up. It's called israelhasbeenrocketfree4.com. Those are the words, no breaks. israelhasbeenrocketfree4.com. And basically it's a clock that resets every time a code red siren goes off somewhere in the country. So you can keep that on your screen and see how long we go without a rocket. And again, Ban Ki-moon calls it atrocious. Kerry on Hot Mic, big story, says, oh, it's a hell of a pinpoint operation. It's a hell of a pinpoint operation. And he's very, very upset that so many citizens are being killed. But again, like Yitzchak just told me, what'd you say, Yitzchak, that even Al Jazeera admitted?
According to Al Jazeera, to statistics that they are publishing, and they are no friends to Israel, it would seem that the vast majority of the people being killed in Gaza, and this of course is not IDF statistics, but Arab statistics, are males between the age of 19 and 29. Gee, what profile might that fit?
But again, yes, there's a very high number of people that have been killed in Gaza. As of today, as of today's program, as of this moment, it's 600 Gazans that have been killed. Again, there are terrorists that are being killed. The more the merrier. I hope a lot of those are terrorists, and unfortunately some of them are not, and that is only one reason for that, because Hamas fires their rockets from the most congested civilian population in order to make it more difficult for Israel, because Hamas knows that Israel is the most moral army in the world. By the way, the IDF also has a video of terrorists getting away in an ambulance. So the UN school gives rockets back to the Hamas. They get away in ambulances, and some of those terrorists that were coming out of tunnels were dressed in IDF uniforms. And this is what's going on, and so it goes, and so it goes. But in the meantime, there's a couple of news items that you might not have seen, because we're all so busy condemning Israel. One news item that you might not have seen was that...
11 minutes, by the way, Rabbi, since the last rocket fell.
Okay, Israel has been rocketfree4.com.
While we've been recording this show, rockets have fallen.
I see it in front of me there at the screen. Israel has been rocketfree4.com. So a story that you might not have seen, the American Air Force attacked a number of sites from the air in Afghanistan a couple days ago, and there were at least 20 killed, and many of them were civilians. Of course, the main story I would think that the world should be interested in is the fact that somebody, apparently Russian weapons or Russian-backed insurgents actually shot down a passenger plane above the Ukraine with nationals from more than 20 different countries. And I think it was almost 300 people whose bodies were strewn over a 10-kilometer area in the Ukraine. Very big mystery. Haven't heard a lot of clarity about that. Some people have said that, that the perpetrator should be brought to justice.
Kerry's not working on it.
Kerry's not working on it, and that's because...
Obama's playing billiards.
That's because, Obama is now taking the world's longest vacation on record of any American president. I mean, and what is he going to do about Putin anyway? I mean, what could he possibly say to Putin? Except, no, sir, and thank you, sir. But so yeah, that's what's going on in the world today that you live in, that somebody goes and shoots down a passenger plane at 32,000 feet. But in the meantime, I got to tell you another thing. The Telegraph from England, July 22nd, reports that the Islamic State killed 270 in a Syrian gas field massacre. But of course, another very, very big story is from the London-based English-language Arabic news site called Ashraq al-Awsat. Tells us that between Thursday of last week and Sunday of this week, more than 700 people were massacred in Syria. But Ban Ki-moon doesn't think that that's atrocious, and Kerry and Obama don't think that the main focus has to be that has to stop. They say that the main focus has to be that there is a ceasefire. They don't even say that the main focus here in the Gaza problem is that Hamas should stop its agenda of attacking Israeli citizens. Can you imagine, again, wherever you happen to live, kindergartens, old age homes, your own kitchen, your upstairs bedroom, rockets falling, right? But no, they say the main thing is there has to be a ceasefire. And of course, several times in the past week, or since we've last recorded, there were forced upon Israel humanitarian ceasefires that were supposed to last like 5 hours. And in the middle of the ceasefire, Hamas is raining rockets down on Israel. And the UN requested that Israel make a ceasefire so that the wounded in Gaza could be attended to. So it's all pretty amazing. And then again, begrudgingly, people like Obama and Kerry and other world leaders so begrudgingly say that they accept our right to defend ourselves. And they accept our rights, but it has to be proportionate, and we have to do it all in our power to prevent loss of life in Gaza while they go and make a drone strike in Afghanistan, and in Syria they're butchering 1,000 people. What I don't understand is, do I need their permission? And it's the only word I can think of, begrudging, when they talk about how, well, yes, we do have a right, I suppose. It wouldn't look good for us to say that, that we accept the fact that rockets could fall on a civilian population. It's also Tammuz. It's also much related to those same bloodthirsty monsters that are sovereign, as it were, for all intent and purpose on the Temple Mount now, and the fact that we have allowed this to happen. It's all about everything that's missing without the temple in this world, which is truly a vision of peace for all people, which really could happen if Israel was allowed to be Israel. And of course, again, this is the parasha, unparalleled in the whole Torah, of settling the land and fighting for the land, the whole land, not just a half. That's what this Torah portion is all about. It's all about the land of Israel, and I think that we're really living it this week. But in any event, when we come back, Yitzchak, I know one of the things that we really have to relate to is what's going on in the rest of the world, the effect that the Operation Protective Edge is having on Jewish communities all throughout the world, on the world reaction, and what we can learn from that. And thankfully, we also have some very, very good news that's going on here in the Temple Institute, some very, very exciting, very bold, very innovative news. Speaking of Protective Edge, on the cutting edge of destiny itself, when we come back right away, Temple Talk, Israel National Radio.
Shalom and welcome back. Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. Today, the 24th day of the month of Tammuz, 5774, 22nd day of July, 2014. Rabbi, we've been talking about parashat Masei. I've been talking about the land of Israel. I've been talking about the war here in Israel right now. As our Prime Minister called it, he said, we're fighting for our homes. We're fighting for our homes right now. Rabbi, you mentioned earlier Gush Katif and the beautiful communities that existed in Gaza until 2005, 2004, when they were all uprooted and the Jews were expelled from Gaza. Earlier in our history, we had a patriarch named Yitzchak, Isaac, who also sojourned in the land, the area of Gaza. And he was famous also for digging. He dug wells. Yitzchak was known for digging many wells in that area. And each well, of course, brought up Mayim Chaim, brought up waters of life. So when our forefather Isaac was in that area, he dug into the earth and brought forth life. That's his legacy. That's our inheritance. When these demons that live in Gaza today dig, they are digging to bring forth death. And that's it. That's the difference. That's
It's such an amazing thing. I think you just said one of the most brilliant Torah ideas in history. And when you look at Genesis 26 and verse 15, all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham, his father, the Philistines, stopped up and filled them with earth. And it's true, water consistently in the Torah is the symbol of Torah and of life. And Yitzchak, in this very area that we're learning about right now, in the very area of Gaza, he dug wells. So he was into digging also. The fact is, Yitzchak, Hashem is so much in this battle, just like in every battle for the land of Israel. And last week we spoke about that letter that the Givati Brigade commander wrote, and how it caused a whole controversy, like how some secular leftist people said, how dare you bring God into it? What are we, like the fanatic Hezbollah and Hamas people? You're talking about it's a war for God, but obviously it is, because, again, the only reason that we live here is because we believe in God. The only reason that we live here is because we want to be here, because this is the land that Hashem wants us to be in. And that's all there is to that. But some people do recognize that, as a matter of fact, because another really interesting item that people were talking about the past few days, it's on the internet and everybody's seen it on Facebook, is a headline from the, what is it, the British Telegraph, from page 17, of it says a terrorist was interviewed and said that what could we do? Their God changes the direction of our missiles in midair, and that basically is what's going on. And there's so much of Hashem in this battle, and I want to take that even further, because the Jewish people are the reflection of Hashem in this world. Again, we've spoken about this at length, whether they like it or not, whether they know it or not, whether they accept it or not. That's exactly what we are. You just spoke about the forefather Yitzchak. The whole relationship that God has with the Jewish people is based on the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that he promised their progeny, through Isaac shall your seed be called. He promised them this land. So everything is about the fulfillment of Hashem's word. And the tremendously disproportionate criticism of Israel for trying to survive, right? Everybody talks about, like you just mentioned to me earlier, like Kerry, and I used to call him Mr. Magoo. That was so whimsical and fun-loving of me. Like, how could I possibly have called such an evil, horrible monster Mr. Magoo? And you used to say to me, even then, off mic, as friends, you used to say to me, like, why are you calling him Mr. Magoo? Mr. Magoo was such a beloved, benign character. Well, you're right about that. And I'm back to calling him what he is. And that's as much as we'll say about that. But he is a Kerry. But in any event, he's talking about, like, and Obama, they're talking about how, we have to be more concerned about the loss of life in Gaza. But like you mentioned to me, one of the ministers of the Likud today is Israel Katz. He said, what about the lives of Israeli citizens? Don't we have to be worried about the lives of Israeli citizens?
I have never heard so much across-the-board criticism of the American administration, of Kerry, of Obama, from politicians, from pundits, from newscasters. Israel is indignant. Wherever you look, wherever you hear, from left to right, they're indignant, they're insistent. We are united and determined that we have to finish this off.
Yesterday
and put an end to this terror.
Former Ambassador Michael Oren, a very
Ambassador to the United States.
He wrote something like, Kerry is coming back, much to our sorrow.
Who invited him? He shouldn't be
May God
here.
bless and keep these people far away from us, to quote Fiddler on the Roof. But Yitzchak, what's amazing is that all over the world there are this tremendous outpouring of hatred for Israel.
For
Paris
Jews.
is burning. They're
Pogroms.
forcing Jews into a synagogue. They're
burning Jewish businesses. Do you understand? This is crystal milk. That's what they're doing.
Unbelievable.
They're burning
It's
Jewish
1933. All over again, these tremendous demonstrations
France,
that are going
Germany.
on all over the world, and in America too, in Boston and Los Angeles, where they have this
San Francisco.
die-in, right? And they're attacking Jews, and we read about the clandestine anti-Semitic activities that were going on in Brandeis University against the Jewish administration and against Jewish teachers. And you know what? What is amazing to me is that for so long now, they've been feeding us this idea that, we've got nothing against the Jewish people. Some of our best friends are Jews. We love Seinfeld. It's the Zionists. It's all about Zionism. It's not about Jews. It's not about Jewish people. It's about Zionists. And as we know, in recent years, this has been the ploy of the haters, that anti-Semitism became anti-Zionism, and it became fashionable and completely politically correct to be anti-Zionist, and it didn't mean that you were anti-Jewish. But that thin veneer, that masquerade, that game has completely exploded and fallen apart. That ridiculous lie has been exposed, and you know what? The genie is out of the bottle. And just like I mentioned earlier, the best analogy that I can muster for describing what these tunnels in Gaza, this crisscross network of elaborate death that they developed in their land in order to be able to kill us better, is like an ant farm. So to stay in the vernacular, in the world of vermin, what's going on today with the anti-Semites is like when you go into a dark room and you put the light on, and all of a sudden the roaches jump out from everywhere. They're jumping out, these vermin, from everywhere. And if it used to be acceptable to be anti-Israel, well, the haters have lost their patience with that mechanism, and now at all of these demonstrations that are against the state of Israel, they turn immediately in seconds, unless they started out that way, as being anti-Jews. Jews everywhere are feeling in danger. I just read a survey that 80% of British Jewry feel that they're personally responsible for what's going on in Gaza, which, by the way, they are, as far as I'm concerned, because they are Jews and we are all in this together. And this is a battle for our survival. And our survival here is about your survival. And our children in the IDF, just as they are protecting us and just as they are ready to give their lives for their families and for the Jewish people in this land, the people of Israel that live in this land are here to give their lives for you, because there is no Jewish life or significance anywhere if it wouldn't be for the fact that the Jewish people are in the land of Israel. And, deal with it, because that's all there is to it. But what's going on now is that one after the other, Paris, London, cities across America, what's being proven is that this is not about Israel. But, like we always said, like we always knew, like you always knew, like we've always known since the beginning of time, this is about the Jewish people. And there's no excuse anymore. It's so clear. It's so clear, I mean, a band of terrorists in the Ukraine shoot down a passenger plane. America does what they want wherever they want, as they always have done, as they massacre the Native Americans, they massacre in Afghanistan, they massacre wherever they want, right? No permission needed, no excuse, civilians, not civilians. ISIS, ISIL in Syria, wherever, butchering hundreds of people a day, you can't even count. No condemnation, no headlines, you're not even going to know about it. The problem is what Israel is doing in Gaza. This is riveting the world. The fact that there are these high civilian casualties in Gaza because Hamas cynically manipulates their own people, and they actually fire from the midst of dense populations, and they use women and children, and they urge the residents of northern Gaza to remain in their homes to provide cover. That's not going to be told, and you're not going to be told in conventional media about them using ambulances to make their getaway, and you're not going to be told about the horrible massacre that they were intending on perpetrating from these tunnels against children and women and every Israeli. You're not going to be told about that, because the problem is the Jews. The problem is the Jews, and it's in this week's Torah portion. Hashem commands the Jewish people to come into the land of Israel and to settle it and to dwell within these borders. And it's a shame, it's a pity that the world didn't know that brings about blessing for the whole world. As we've taught many times, the Midrash that says that if the world would have understood what the Holy Temple brings to them, they would have surrounded it with fortresses to make sure it would never be destroyed. It's happening all over again. And this month of Tammuz, which is the month for seeing and speaking good about the land of Israel so that we can rectify the terrible gossip of the spies, right? But it has such a predispensation, a proclivity. It has such a leaning towards evil against the land of Israel. It's so rife, it's so ripe, it's so ready to be picked that apparently people can't resist it, and it must be some sort of lust that they have to speak against the land of Israel, because what we're seeing now all across the world is a hate fest that we've never seen before. So that this I can't pronounce his name. I have a block. Yitzchak, help me out. The Turk. Erdogan. There's a G in there. Leave it to the Turks to put a G in there. Erdogan goes and says that what Israel is doing in Gaza is more barbaric than Hitler. And the South African ruling party that the Jews of South Africa, of course, helped put into place because they're so liberal, democratic, and compassionate for everyone, they went and they compared what Israel is doing to what the Nazis are doing, right? Understand, we have 5 million Israelis within rocket range. We have a existential threat to our survival constantly. And they're comparing us to the Nazis and to Hitler, who systematically murdered 6 million people, who made their bodies into soap and lampshades, etc., etc. That's what we're doing in Gaza. That's what we're doing in Gaza. How about giving us some peace and quiet and letting us live our lives in our little tiny piece of land, and then we wouldn't have to be in Gaza? Do you think that we're happy that our boys are dying? And how many soldiers have we lost today at this count? 27. One is missing. Who knows what that means? And on it goes. And yet, Kerry, may his name be obliterated, Ban Ki-moon, all these clowns, all these professional buffoons of the generation, the greatest that the world has ever seen, they are urging us to make a ceasefire. And during that ceasefire, what will happen? What's happened over the past years is that Hamas will regroup, and they will get stronger, and they will get more money, and they will build anew, because that's their goal, and that's all there is to it. So hopefully we will have the strength to force this moment to its ultimate victory, and we will do what we have to do and not do something half-baked and not leave it, because I think we've all seen now, and it is very beautiful, the unity that we have here now and what we've seen. We can't leave it now. We can't leave it now, and we can't allow that these boys died for nothing.
Bearing that in mind, we're going to do a switch. Flip side of all the hatred, vicious, animal, bestial hatred toward Jews that's being expressed throughout the world now. Let's look at the Jews in the land of Israel. Let's look at the incredible, as you mentioned a moment ago, unity and outpouring of love. If you don't live here, you can't believe what's going on here, the concern and care for our soldiers. They interviewed the director of the hospital in Ashkelon, where they're admitting, tens and tens of soldiers, and the woman who's the director has 2 sons in Gaza, and they said, do you look in the list to see if one of your sons is here? And she goes, they're all my sons. They're all my sons. She said, they're everybody's sons, and that's exactly how this country feels. A lone soldier who was raised in Texas. He was actually from an Israeli family that moved to Texas, and he moved back, and he was killed. And being here alone, people said, nobody's going to be at his funeral. So the word went out from the Haifa soccer team fans, because apparently he was a fan of the Haifa soccer team, and they put this out on Facebook. More than 20,000 people showed up for his funeral yesterday. This is beyond patriotism. This is love, and this is unity, and I'm going to use this opportunity here in the 3 weeks. We go through the same thing every year, mourning and thinking about the Holy Temple, and there's criticism every year and a critique from people who say, to people who are the likes of us, they say, you want to build a Holy Temple, but first we need to have ahavat chinam. How do you translate that, Rabbi?
Baseless love.
Baseless love. Selfless love. We have to love each other first. We can't build a holy temple, a beautiful thing like that, unless we're all in love with one another. And guess what? It's here, people. We do love one another. It takes a war sometimes to bring out the best in us. But we do love one another here in this land, and we care for one another. So what are you going to say now?
So for all those detractors...
Is it time to build a holy temple now? We love one another. We're united. This is it. If war can bring us together, can't building a house for God bring us together?
And people use that in a very cynical way. They say, "Oh, don't the sages say that you have to reach the level of baseless love before you do it?"
But you know what?
You're right. That is a very beautiful insight. We have reached that level, and we have proven it. And one by one, the obstacles that stand in the way of building the temple are falling. And one of them is this revelation that Israel indeed is on a level of tremendous unity. And you know what? Whoever can laugh at that and say, that's not what I see, or that's not whereas I'm living. Well, you know what? Maybe you're not part of it. Maybe you're not going to be part of those that come back. When Ezra called for the Jews to return, when Cyrus gave permission back in the returning exiles from the end of the first exile, how many came back? You know, only 42,360 Jews came back to build the temple, and millions stayed behind. Another major obstacle to the building of the Holy Temple is the renewal of purity in Israel. Can you imagine? And I said to my good friend Jim, can you imagine what would happen if we renewed the process of the sprinkling of the ashes of the red heifer and brought back purity to the world? Do you know that it is possible? Do you know that halachically there are many, many details and accommodations and facilitations that are being worked through now according to every aspect of Torah law to renew the red heifer so that there would no longer be impurity and we would be able to begin building the temple? Can you imagine the wave of tremendous, should I call it repentance, of return, of powerful spiritual change that would happen? And that's another thing that we are coming closer and closer to. Yes, you heard that we have a red heifer somewhere in America. Well, we may be working even closer with that heifer or others, and we may be coming much closer than anybody would have imagined to bring purity back into the world. And of course, with all these missiles flying, who knows? As everybody is jokingly speculating, maybe one will take out that golden dome. Who knows? The point is, this is all part of the same test that we've been going through in every generation. It's parashat Masei. It makes it very, very clear that there's only one purpose for all the journeys that we've been going through, and that's to come home, to come into the land. And when you come into the land, God says, you have to cleanse it, you have to settle it. And I always look at the Torah as being the story of our lives today. So that's who we are. We are that generation, and maybe we'll do it this time. Maybe we'll stop walking around in circles, chasing our tails in the wilderness, and maybe we'll come in, and maybe we'll really do what we have to do to set up shop, to set up house, to live the life that we were intended to live in the land of Israel.
Speaking of return, yesterday, Rabbi, 400 French Jews made Aliyah here in the midst of this war. And this morning, more than 200 Jews from America made Aliyah.
And I am so proud and happy when I hear that these Jews are healthy and they have a normal world outlook. And first of all, for French Jews, I mean, really, mon cher, if you,
it's hell there.
My fellow Juifs, after this week, if you still want to stay there, something's really wrong. Something's really wrong. So yesterday I was at a meeting with my precious Rabbi Ariel, speaking to some French woman who just arrived, and I said to her, it's so impressive that you came and everything like that, and I said that line. I said, well, of course, if anybody's staying there now, they must be mad. And she, got very defensive, and she said, well, it's not an easy thing to pick up. People have families and everything like that. It's not a simple thing. And Rav Ariel, she said, what more than that? And Rav Ariel said, you know what? We live in such a spoiled generation. Do you think it was ever easy? What it was like for all the people who came and gave up everything. And now it's easier than ever.
We have
I'm
Skype.
sorry, it's easier than ever. You get on a plane, just don't fly over the Ukraine. You get on a plane, and you're here. And that's all there is to it. There are no excuses. And
wake up if you're living there in the diaspora and you're a Jew, because the pogromists are marching. They're in your community. They're marching by your house, and if they know
they're
that,
at a corner
if they know
near
who you are, they'll knock on the door.
They're at a corner near you soon. And you know what? Again, and maybe it sounds ridiculous to you while the code red is sounding. Yitzchak, go to israelhasbeenrocketfree4.com and tell me how long we've been without a rocket. 35 minutes and 31 seconds. But you know something? I don't know how to explain it. This is the only, it's just not only just the safest, it is the most wonderful, fulfilling, it is just the only place to be. I cannot picture leaving here ever again. I'm really sorry. Don't get nervous, all my dear and precious friends and family everywhere. We have to make arrangements, but how could we leave? How could we leave here? How could we leave this land now that the world is exposing itself for what it really is, go to the talkbacks on any article or feature when someone's trying to take a position defending Israel and look at the filth, the vile venom that comes out. It's not about Israel. It's a hatred for Jews that is rearing its head, and it never went away. And it takes something like our victory and our standing up for ourselves to bring it out in all these people. And that's why they're so upset, because we are here and we're trying to make a life for ourselves. And if only we would just die. You know, that's the whole problem. No, there's nothing that everybody loves as much as a dead Jew. Then everybody would bow their heads for a minute. Well, maybe this time we'll actually do it right and we won't die. And maybe we'll rebuild the temple. Maybe this is the best Tikkun of Tammuz and Av that we've ever had. Maybe these 3 weeks of mourning will turn into the real foundation for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple in our time like never before. Because all this battle, what it's really about, is the rebuilding of the Holy Temple.
And that, my friends, takes us to the end of this week's Temple Talk. Thank you so much for being with us. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for our boys fighting for our survival. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.